Hi, everyone. So I want to talk about the legal forms of business and the options that you have. Um, and there are essentially two things to think about. One is legal exposure, and the other is tax effects. Um, those are the big deals. Um, so I am not by any stretch of the imagination giving legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just telling you things that I've done and things that I've seen. Um, and giving you information to where you can make at least an initial decision about what strategy you might use. Okay. So when I started my business, I really didn't think about this at all. I got a bookkeeping client, and essentially I was sending invoices to them. I sent them a W-9. Uh, and they gave me a 1099 at the end of the year that was based on my Social Security number. And that works just fine. Okay. So uh, when you get these 1099s, you report them on your Schedule C. And hopefully you'll keep track of your books and everything because you will have expenses running your business. And and all of that income will be taxable to you. Okay. On the Schedule C, on the 1040. Now, if you decide to do an LLC, there's also a professional LLC, but those generally licensed professionals use those, like CPA firms, uh, vet offices, doctors' offices, things like that. They form professional LLCs. Uh, if you started a bookkeeping business, you would not have to do that. Um, and an LLC works just fine for that. Um, and one of the reasons I decided to change it eventually to an LLC is that um, I know it's a little bit more protection against personal liability. Although I also do carry errors and omissions insurance, which for professions like bookkeeping, you may need to have. And starting any business, you may have some liability that you get insurance for. Like, for example, I have a client right now that does uh, indoor inflatable play for kids, think bouncy houses kind of thing. But it's indoors, so they don't take parties to homes. The parties come to them, at their building. And so they get insurance, to protect them from any liability, right? But they're also still an LLC. They're just building some protection for themselves. So an LLC, um, if you do just a regular LLC, you'll have a 1065 form that you have to file at the end of the year. There's usually no taxes associated with that. It's just pass-through income. So that net income, that net bottom line goes to your 1040. Now, the other thing about this, from a sole proprietor standpoint or an LLC, you will have to think about paying estimated taxes. And I've done a separate video on that and how to think about that. Um, so uh, that's a very important part of kind of thinking this through. Um, Now you can also be an LLC and get an S Corp status with the IRS, and that's a federal designation, so that you don't have all these uh, extra payroll taxes on all of that income. But there's one very serious element of that. If you get S Corp status, you must run a payroll and pay taxes on a regular basis for payroll. So that's an important factor to consider as you think about what you do. Um, and different people have different rules of thumb as to when you should become or apply for the S Corp status, which I'll do another video on that one to talk about it specifically. But generally, I think most advice is at least have a minimum gross revenue of 100K. Okay. And so um, those are the things to think about. Now, you can also be incorporated. you could decide to do that. And that doesn't mean that you have to be publicly traded at all. You can be a private corporation. I don't know that I'll ever go to that. I think I'm good where I'm at. But I do have some clients that's what they are. They're incorporated. And they do, if you are incorporated, you will have a separate business tax filing and pay taxes based on that filing. Okay. Where all the other forms of business go to your 1040. Okay. So if you have any questions about that on the YouTube channel, you can certainly ask questions. You can always book time with us to talk about it too. And we can chat about any of this. And and so again, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you that's kind of how I did it and the things that I thought about as I went about that process. Okay. All right. Thanks so much. And I'll see you on another video.